Welcome back. This is the furnace that came with my house, and by that I mean it was installed when the house was built in 1954. It was last serviced in 2012, and yeah, she's a beast. This is an oil-fired forced hot air unit. And according to some of the HVAC guys I've already spoken to, it's one of the only ones left in existence of its make and model. This oil burner is based on the Fess oil burner design, dating back to the 1930s, I believe. And this is the same type of burner you would use as a conversion for an old coal-fired unit. And you can see, you know, she's got some miles on her, but she still runs. And I'm going to keep running this thing as long as I can. So, interestingly enough, it's one of the only furnaces that has actually survived. It's on its second oil tank. The original oil tank, which was made out of like 1/4-inch thick steel, had already begun to leak. So I just had this tank installed a couple days ago. Anyway, today we're changing out the burner motor. The motor is making a hell of a lot of noise, and it's time to go. It quiets down if you add a little bit of oil to it. And in fact, the burner tech that looked at it said, oh no, your motor's fine, you just need a coupling. But the coupling isn't broken yet. These are made out of, I believe they're made out of a flexible rubber. And if this one breaks, I may not be able to find another one. So I gotta keep that in mind. Let's take a look inside here. There's a lot of buildup. I'm gonna try to clean some of this out. Somehow. But no, you know what? I'm going to leave well enough alone. I'm just going to clean the squirrel cage blower. I picked up a motor. This appears to be the right one. And, but, although I suspect that it's not, I don't think it's supposed to be open like this. But, I wonder if there's any way I can modify it. Well, let's take the squirrel cage off. It's not broken yet, but it will be. So let me try to. Yeah, you don't want to break this, because if I break it, I won't have heat. That's why normally you'd want to service one of these things, you know, in the springtime, when there's plenty of time to obtain parts, in a case where they may not be easy to come by. But I just, yeah, so it's rubber. It's got 2 collars on it. Let me get the measurements on it so I can at least try to obtain another one. Get this squirrel cage cleaned up. Get some degreaser on it. But yeah, see how this motor is all sealed up inside? So what I might do, I wonder if I can swap the motor base plate. But, well, anyway. Yeah, that's not going to last. That's not going to last. That's unfortunate. Well, anyway, we'll get this cleaned up and move on. So there's the old burner motor, and this was the original blower motor that had been replaced a couple years ago by the previous owner. So I lost a little bit of footage. Spoiler alert, it does run, and it runs very well. But let's talk a little bit about this motor and why it's the wrong one. There's 2 reasons. The motor is supposed to be sealed to protect it against, I mean, you saw this base plate, you see how filthy that is? Well, all that gunk will wind up inside the motor, all over the windings and the bearings and everything. It's not cool. But one of the other reasons why that's a problem is because it creates an air leak. Vacuum leak, if you will. The air coming into the combustion chamber is regulated by this damper. What happens when you have, this is under vacuum, like this chamber here, that's the blower, that feeds air to the flame. Well, you've got an air leak on this side, so this is going to become an intake as well. So that's not good, because it's just not good. It's not built to work that way. This motor cannot stay in here for long. In fact, it won't last very long. In fact, I might get a couple months out of it, if that. Maybe a few weeks. So I really do need to get another one ordered, like ASAP. So what I'd be doing is I'd be looking at this S number. Actually, I'm going to go off this one, which is, this is a cross-reference and all that stuff. 316P687, but it has to say oil burner motor on it. This one does not. This is really just a general use motor. That all aside, this furnace runs quieter and smoother than it's run in years, I assume. So yeah, we'll take care of that. No big deal. As for maintaining this thing, I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to get ignition parts. I don't know where to get nozzles. I don't know. I assume it's a universal nozzle. I could just go and buy one. But as of right now, I'm planning on just leaving well enough alone. I really just want to get the winter out of this sucker, and then I want to replace it with a higher efficiency unit. Oil is expensive. Furnaces, well, they're expensive, but one tank of oil costs around $700 to fill this tank from bottom to top at today's price. It's around $700. It cost me $470. Actually, yeah, $470 to fill it, and it was down to right about here. And I got a discount because I paid for the oil in cash, so I got a little bit of a price break, but not much. But you know, a new furnace. I did price it out to get a Thermopride, which is the best forced hot air oil fired unit you can buy. Was around, I think it was going to run me around $7,000, but I can get a Rheem for about $5,000 installed, which that's what I'm going to go for. Thermopride would be ideal, but Rheem makes decent products. And when they put the new one in, I'm going to have the unit placed on blocks or patio bricks. It should not be on the floor like this. That's why it's starting to rust, because water actually runs around the furnace. When this door leaks, it runs all the way around it, and you can see it rusts, and then it goes into that drain over there. That's my only water leak down here, and of course this is right in the line of fire. So I suspect that there's no more floor left on this. This is probably sitting right on the, actually, what is that? Looks like there's some, oh, that is steel. Okay, all right. Well, there's steel there, just not much. Anyway, so yeah, this thing is, it's been around the block, and you know, it's time. It's definitely time to give it, you know, a proper burial. But anyway, that's why you can't use an open frame motor like that in an oil burner. But it is working, and you know, we'll see how long. I don't suspect it'll last very long. But again, $100 for a motor. Even if I have to pay for 2 motors, it's still cheaper than calling the oil company or somebody else to come in here and fix it, because they're going to charge me like $200 just for the freaking service call. It costs the estate selling this house. I told, as the one stipulation that I had them, the one thing I had them do, and it was a deal breaker for me, was they had to have the oil leak fixed. This is a Firematic valve, And what happens is, let's say this whole thing goes up into flames. This right here, this knob, which is a threaded knob, and this is spring-loaded inside. This knob will melt away, and the valve will snap shut. That way it can no longer be fed oil. And it was leaking oil profusely. In fact, it was pooling up right here. And I said, before I sign anything, I want that leak fixed and cleaned up. Because if that leak was bad enough, it could have easily caused the problem requiring EPA involvement. So they fixed that one little leak, just to replace the Firematic valve, to have somebody come and do it. It cost them something like $300. I have the receipt somewhere. And no, it wasn't that much. It was like $200 or so to fix that one valve. And that valve is like probably a $10 part. And if I were to call someone to replace that burner motor, I'd be looking at labor plus parts plus markup plus the service call. I'd be looking at $400 or $500 maybe. I'm pulling that number out of thin air. Well, let's put it this way. To have the oil tank replaced, the tank itself, that's a Granby oil tank, it costs around $500-600 in that size if I were to buy that tank. It cost me $1,700 to have it installed, and that was a low estimate. Normally it costs around $2,300. I got two estimates, and they both came in at $2,300. All you're paying for is labor. The tank, the materials, let's just say $700. That's $1,000 in labor. Of course, they had their pipe cutting machine out there cutting all new iron pipe for the vent and the fill pipe. But, you know, and I did notice they didn't put the dead leg in. They're supposed to install what's called a dead leg, which is a pipe that doesn't do anything. All it does is it goes from the tank to the ceiling to the rafter up here. And the only purpose of that is to prevent the tank from floating up should the basement ever flood. And they did not do that. But they said they were going to, but they didn't do it. So I got to make a phone call and say, hey, where's my dead leg? Those are the same guys who said I didn't need a motor, I needed a coupler. I'll take care of my own equipment, thank you very much. Although a coupler would have been much cheaper, a motor is what it needed. All right, let's see what happens. Ooh. Instant fire. Oh, she sounds so pretty. No more clock. Oh, that sounds beautiful. So I'm going to order a new motor and a coupling. And that should fix it for good. Listen to that 65-year-old beast run like a champ. Unbelievable. I did clean up the impeller a little bit while I was in there. But yeah, that should not be an open deck motor like this. I could swap the base plate, but I don't have a bearing press, so I'm not going to do that. It sounds so good. So what's going to happen here is that motor is going to burn itself up. And when it does, I still have this one to fall back on. It sounds beautiful. Ha ha ha. So yeah, I'm gonna get another motor, and but for now we'll enjoy quiet heat. Sound good? Sound good. But yeah, this is probably one of the old. Now let's take another look at this thing while we're here. Let's just, because you guys are probably really curious about this old beast. I did some research on this gun, and it is based on the Fess, which later became the Petro Company, which you've probably seen their trucks driving around the neighborhood because they still are in business. This particular gun was manufactured by Quiet Heat, Newark, New Jersey, Model A. And there There it is. This motor is nice and cool to the touch. That's a good sign. How this works though is the motor runs so that coupling that you saw that goes after the blower, the squirrel cage, attaches via set screw to the oil pump, which then pumps the oil into the nozzle. And this sucker right here is the massive transformer which generates the current needed for the igniter to spark, thus igniting the fuel. And as far as I know, that thing runs constantly. So whenever this gun is energized, as long as it's energized, that will create the spark needed to ignite the flame. So if it blows out for any reason, it's like a constant arc that, you know, for whatever reason, if the flame does go out, which it shouldn't, you know. Now, just like a modern oil burner, you can adjust the air level through this sleeve here. You just loosen up that screw. There goes the blower motor. You loosen up this screw, and this is your air damper. And if it's too smoky, you open it up. If it's, I forget how you can tell if there's too much air, but the flame should look something like this. So it's generating a nice constant flame. Oh, this thing is so quiet now. It sounds better than, I mean, you can't even hear it over here. Now there's a couple of safety features built into this furnace. This device here, I mean, modern furnaces don't have any of this. It's all packaged much more differently, but the concept is the same. This box here is your over temperature control box, and what this does is it will shut the burner down if the temperature coming out of the exhaust is too high. So if it's too hot, it shuts the burner down, and then once it cools down again, if the blower is still going and is still calling for heat, this will reignite the burner, re-energize it. In fact, the thermostat wire connects to this, I believe. I believe this is like the main control box, and this is my thermostat wire. I believe that's what this is. Yeah, it goes along that beam. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, that's definitely the thermostat wire. So it goes to this box. So this box is energized via, I think it goes right to that switch actually. And then it supplies power to the burner. Now, there's a temperature switch, I believe it's somewhere in the firebox, that will turn the blower on once it reaches a certain set point. In the case where the temperature drops below that set point while it's still calling for heat, the burner will continue running, the blower shuts down, and then it restarts itself once that set point is reached. Now that's pretty much how most gas and oil furnaces work. I mean, essentially. Boy, does this thing sound so good now. So yeah, I've got a brand new oil line going to it. I actually paid someone to install the tank and the line. Cost me $1,700 to do it all, and they did a nice job. Then they filled the tank, which I am burning through a lot of oil. This thing's running at about 78% efficiency. You know, it's definitely at the end of its life, and then some, but you know, I don't want to spend the $5,000 to $6,000 to replace it just yet, because it's still able to produce heat, and you know what? It's going to run it. As a matter of fact, the company that came in to do the tank told me that, you know what, your burner's running fine, your furnace is good, it's safe, just run it. Why replace it right now? I mean, you don't need to. So it's one of the oldest. This is probably one of, I mean, it's not the only one left in the world, but it is one of the oldest oil-fired forced hot air furnaces currently running today. I just extended its life a little bit. And this is still cool to the touch. This one was running hot. You touch it, like right by about this point in time, you touch that motor, and you almost have to pull your hand away. It was running that hot. So clearly it had problems. Well, does this thing have oil ports? Probably, but they're not on the top. Yeah, this is not a proper oil burner motor, so it's just not kosher, but we'll see how long it lasts. All right, thank you for watching.